we have a propensity to accept violence, even put it on primetime television, murder and death and war and blowing up things. And that's okay, but we don't openly talk about sexuality and sex, which is the very thing that we're all here to do. Technology sometimes spearheads broader technology. So, even if you look at the internet and how much adult content there really is on the internet, and how some of these things like streaming content and all these other things that we now take for granted, in some ways were derived from that seed that was sort of planted in the earlier days. So one person sitting somewhere could watch porn in the comfort of their own computer chair.
Exactly. So, this is Heja Framtiden, the Swedish podcast about the future. We're podcasting from Epicenter in Stockholm at Sime 2018. And I'm here with Matt McMullen.
Hello.
From the company RealDoll. What are you presenting here today?
So I brought with me one of our robotic characters named Harmony. She's kind of a little bit of a celebrity, I guess. So I brought Harmony with me as well as a little bus to display her on. Did not bring an entire anatomically correct body. There's a little bit more logistics involved with something like that. But the idea is to get people thinking about this concept of AI and robotics being applied to human relationships and human emotions and sexuality and all of the things in between.
And what can Harmony do?
Harmony is like many other human-like robots. So it's a face that's capable of lip syncing and speaking in real time and having the mouth roughly move in time with that. She can make expressions. She can then, using those rough foundations, she can run an app that we've developed that is a customizable sort of an AI generator. Basically, the user would log into the app and choose traits of personality that interest them, and they can make them more or less dominant in the personality. Then they will choose a voice. We have different accents available. And then they'll build an on-screen avatar. So the app could be used standalone, or if you have a Harmony robot, you'd be able to connect to it by Bluetooth and run this AI that you've created through the robot.
So you're basically customizing a partner, more or less.
In a way, yeah. So I think the idea that many people have when they think of this is, you want to design your own partner so you don't have to deal with human beings. I don't think that's necessarily accurate. For me, it's more about specific use cases, specific individuals who may find that the idea of having an artificial companion is more appealing to them or more fulfilling to them than having a human relationship. So there are people for whom I think that will make a great deal of sense. And then there will be other people who it just would never work for them.
So Harmony is so sophisticated that you can actually fall in love with her. Is that correct to assume?
I think that the act of falling in love can occur with a lot of things besides robots. I mean, in some sense, there are people out there who are in love with their car. They collect motorcycles. They're in love with their motorcycle. So that feeling of love could definitely happen with something like Harmony. But I always talk a little bit about the actual experience of being, quote, in love. And I think that there is a large component to being in love that is internal and subjective. So you perceive that you're in love because you are really sort of focusing all your energies and your attentions on the emotions that you're getting when you're with this other person. Sometimes it's not returned. You know, sometimes you're really in love with somebody and they're just kind of like, whatever. So that same sort of equation, I think, can happen with an artificial intelligent being, be it a robot or a digital being. I think that as the technology advances, it will become more and more possible and common that this can happen with specific people.
What about the sexual aspect of it? How far have you come there?
Well, the sexual part, when we started this whole thing, I actually looked at the sexual part as that it would be the easiest thing. Because I've been making the RealDoll for 20 years. They don't talk, they don't move, they don't, they're very sort of just there. And people have been successfully, utilizing them as a sex device for all these years. So in one sense, I thought, well, that part already works. What do we do now to add to that? What can we do with AI to make conversation happen? And will that bring that scenario to another level? Instead of this inanimate object, all of a sudden it's moving and talking. So insofar as the sexual function of the robot, we have now a special section of the app that we call X mode, where basically it's sort of a reactive AI. So it's going to react to what you're doing. And it can simulate an orgasm and excitement and all of these sort of sounds of pleasure that you would expect to happen on that path.
Okay, so and bodily she has all the functions you would expect from a human being.
Yes and no. So obviously human beings move from head to toe, and there are certainly interactions during sexual activity that movement would help. And we'll get there eventually. So we'll start, working on animating the body and such as time goes on. But the sense is there. So she can sense what you're doing and where you're doing it. That's the idea. So she can react to you're touching her here versus there. And we want that to be a dynamic experience, so it's in real time.
But what is the material? I mean, does it feel real?
We're using medical grade silicone for the dolls and the robots as well. So it's pretty much the most expensive synthetic rubber that you can get. It's widely used in prosthetics. It's widely used in implants. So it is very lifelike. And there are obviously special additives that we have to use to attain that level of feel. And once it's heated, it's actually quite lifelike. But I mean, it's rubber. It's not skin. It's not biological in nature. So there are differences. But that being said, it is very pleasurable to the touch, and most people notice that right away.
Do you see any limitations on what you can achieve with this technology? I mean, if you combine the research in the anatomy and bodily experience and the AI, can you basically produce any kind of fantasy person you want in the future?
Well, I think this technology is in its infancy right now, on all fronts. I mean, meaning, what once was a very crude chatbot is now starting to feel almost like you're having a normal conversation. The voice engines, I mean, the synthesis that we're able to get with text-to-speech is now vastly better than it was even a few short years ago. And then the hardware, the robotics, and obviously the dolls themselves, the materials and the chemistry. And yes, I think as time goes on, all of these things are going to get better and better. And as that occurs, suddenly you start thinking of new applications and new ways to, adjust the methodology that you're using because this material wasn't there before or this code didn't exist before. So it's an ever-evolving process, and I think that the robots themselves will continue to evolve as well. One thing I predict will happen is that right now people have this tendency to look at something like Harmony because you attach this robotic head to an anatomically correct body, and you give it a title, sex robot. And that title in itself is kind of limiting, I think. So you're saying sex robot as if that's all it does, but it doesn't. So, I mean, in fact, I would say 90% of what we've done engineering-wise and code-wise and all of these, hours and hours and hours of work that we've put in have nothing to do with sex at all. As one of my good friends put it, to build a good sex robot, you actually have to build a good robot to begin with. The sex part is an aside. So I hope, and I will make all of my own efforts to further this cause of kind of drop the sex word and just, robots in general, lifelike robots that look like people that in certain occasions and certain environments might be capable of having sex, but they're still, at the end of the day, a really cool piece of technology. And I think they're going to find their way into our lives on a lot of different levels. I think we'll see humanoid robots in service positions. Maybe you go into a Starbucks and you're being waited on by a lifelike robot before we know it. I think those are the types of things we're going to see in our common everyday lives. And the more robots you see, the more you get used to seeing them. And it's not this outlandish, crazy thing that where your only frame of reference is scary science fiction movies. And that's where a lot of people have this knee-jerk reaction of terror when you talk about robots, especially if they look like people. Suddenly people go to this science fiction sort of history that we've built around robots. And I think that's not always accurate.
Do you think the sex theme and the word sex tech, is that limiting for you?
I don't think it's limiting for me, but I think what happens is when you are labeled as a maker of sex things, people think that's all you do. Back to the same thing as you say, sex robot, oh, okay, well, that's just that. I think it's sort of akin to if you had a very, very elaborate, super high-end computer at your house, and every once in a while you might use the computer to watch pornography. Does that make that a porn computer? Is it a sex computer? Is that all it's for? So I think that it's very short-sighted of people to look at things that way. I think collectively a lot of the world's cultures have this fundamental issue with sexuality, period. We have a propensity to accept violence, even put it on primetime television, murder and death and war and blowing up things, and that's okay, but we don't openly talk about sexuality and sex, which is the very thing that we're all here to do. And none of us would be here if it weren't for two people called our parents who actually had sex to create us. So I think we're in a good time, though. I think that acceptance and that open-mindedness about things that are sort of connected to sexuality are starting to become more accepted. So back to your original question, yes, sometimes I feel limited when I am pigeonholed as this guy that's in sex tech or this guy that makes sex dolls. Because in some people's minds, they're putting that label on me and it limits what I think I want to do and what my vision is for my art as a whole.
So what is your vision 10 years from now, 20 years from now?
Ultimately, I love the idea of taking what I've done with the dolls. And I have created dolls that look very human. I want to make them now move and actually be able to move like a human and talk like a human. So I'm fundamentally driven to build a human-like robot. Has nothing to do with sex. This is something that I want to do. I'm drawn to it. And so that's what I'm going to do. That's my goal for the next 10 to 20 years, is to continue doing what I'm doing. Now, if it just so happens that having that sex part ends up being a good thing, and maybe it will. I mean, it certainly does get the spotlight on what we're doing, and I'm okay with that. So quite possibly 10 years from now, the robots that we're creating might be actually super fantastic and still capable of having sex.
But they must cost a fortune.
They will probably be expensive, yes. I'm actually in the process of building the upper half of a body, so arms, torso movement, neck movement, and it's not cheap. You go through money rather quickly, especially in the R&D phases of finding the right actuators, finding the right layout, the right control systems, and inevitably this didn't work or that broke, and so yes, it's costly. I would anticipate a full body, truly convincing robot that can move like a human being is probably going to be 6 figures very easily.
But I mean, most likely the costs will drop as you scale.
Costs always do drop, but I also think there is a way, even though making such a robot might be prohibitively expensive, it may not be a perfect model to think of it as a product that you purchase. It might end up being a product that you rent or experience as you need it. You could make a Westworld-style brothel where you pay for this experience and you get to interact with these robots, but you don't necessarily take them home with you. It could be something that for the very wealthy, they want their own, and they can certainly have it. But I think trying to build something like this with the limitation of making it under $10,000 is going to be severely limiting. It's just not it's not possible to build what I want to build without having a pretty good budget.
It's going to be interesting to see where the line is drawn for cheating in the future.
Yes. Yes, it is. And I think similarly, that people always ask, well, is it cheating if you were to have sex with a sex robot versus a human being? And I think it's different. And I think it's also dependent on the person's emotional connection to the situation. So in some sense, if you were cheating purely physically with a sex robot and your partner was aware of it, then it's not cheating. If you're deceptive about it and hiding it and it becomes sort of a fixation and you actually have an emotional need and desire to keep having sex with this robot, then I think, yes, it's cheating.
I suppose you predict that people's aversion to this phenomenon will ease over time as it gets more integrated in society as a whole. I mean, robots. Do you think we will live with robots in the future?
Yes, I think we will live side by side with robots in the future. I think there will come a time when robots and AI-driven machines will go through a period of actually being prejudiced against and maybe treated like crap, because that's what humans do. We like to, pick on each other, let alone, look what people do to animals. And I mean, it's just gonna be a perfect scenario for people to be biased against robots. And the more human-like they get, the more these people that are just averted, have an aversion to it, are going to come out of the woodwork. And then you'll have issues of somebody running up and pushing a robot down and breaking $100,000 piece of machinery just because. So it'll be interesting to see the future. But I also think that there will, for every one of those people that hates it, there will be 2 that don't. So I have a lot of faith in this tech as a good thing, and I have a lot of faith in most of humanity seeing the benefits of it and not looking at the sort of dystopian future that's painted in a lot of science fiction movies.
Marika Smith, that was in another episode of when we talked about sex tech, she said that we as people have to become better at sex because we will have to compete with technology.
Yep.
So it's kind of pushing us at the same time to be more open and communicative and inspiring in a way.
I think that's a very good point, actually, and I've brought that up before. Not just sex, but relationships in general. So if having a synthetic partner became a viable option as we move forward into the future, and more people started opting to have these relationships with AI-driven characters, you'd have to ask yourself why. Like, why is that? Why is there a curve of more and more people adopting this as their choice for a relationship? And the only answer could be that human beings don't treat each other very well. People cheat, people lie, people deceive each other. People do a lot of like crappy things to each other. And that can be a reason for someone to say, you know what, I've had enough. I don't want to trust anyone, and I'm not going to. And we've all been through that. And some people get to a point with these, failed relationships or being betrayed or lied to or cheated on. And they get to a point where they're just like, they're done. They're done with it. And maybe they're a recluse for the rest of their life. But maybe they have the option of having a robot instead. And maybe ultimately, as more and more of that equation starts happening, people might start being honest and not cheating and not deceiving and, making us better people.
If you keep lying to me, I will open the closet and there's the robot waiting.
Right. Don't make me get Harmony out.
Okay, thank you so much, Matt McMullen from RealDoll.
My pleasure.
You will go up on stage soon to present Harmony.
Yes,
to the crowd.
so we're doing another on-stage demo. We'll have Harmony up there with us, and maybe we'll field some questions from the audience. It's always fun.
Probably. All right. Do you have any tips for people who are interested in these questions, reading or online?
We do. There's actually a pretty viable big community of not only people that are into the AI and the robot, but these synthetic companion concepts, be it a doll or a robot. And I think it's interesting to, even if it's not necessarily something that you're into, it's interesting to read about it. So if you go to the RealDoll website, you can actually find, we have a forum. And a lot of people post in there, and you can read, it's called Club RealDoll. And so these people post and talk about their experiences and, maybe some of the stuff they've been through and why they're with a doll and why doll ownership is for them. And you get to know things that maybe people don't think about. It's funny, people tend to go, oh, he bought a really super lifelike doll. He must be a pervert. He must be a nymphomaniac. It's usually none of those things. It's usually someone who's, for one reason or another, they're driven to this through their experiences or through who they are, and it just works for them. But they're good people.
And also, I would assume that couples will be interested in buying one of those in the future.
We do have a fair amount of couples actually come together and pick out a doll. And it's a safe way to experiment with some alternate sort of fantasies that a couple may have,
without stepping into the minefield of
the
person.
The minefield of jealousy. Yeah, that could be a very deep hole if you step in there.
Okay, thank you so much, Matt. This is Heja Framtiden. You can check us out on hejaframtiden.se and follow us on social media and support us on Patreon. Thank you so much for listening.